following is a special presentation of 540 ESPN.
It's me, Austin! Oh, son of a bitch! It's me, Austin! It was me all along, Austin! Fate of WCW is in my hands. You stole it! You stole it! You got Winona! You got it! Fire me! He's hot! He's spicy! He tastes good! Batista, I hope you're watching. Because if you mess with me, I'm going to beat you up. Just like I'm going to beat up Ponzi over here.
For over 10 years, the world's #1 source for professional wrestling news and information. And once again, here's your host, Damian Nelson, Frank Cosentino, and the man they call Meathead. This is the Pro Wrestling Report on 540 ESPN.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Pro Wrestling Report here live on 540 ESPN. It's Monday night, January 5th, 2009. Meathead, it's our first show of the year. The Cos is not with us tonight. He's getting ready for PWR TV, which returns to the airwaves this week. We are here, as I said, live on Monday, January the 5th, 2009.
You just got done saying
you can join us on this action-packed show by calling us all over southeastern Wisconsin at 276-ESPN or 1-800-990-ESPN all over the world. Again, that's 1-800-990-ESPN. The PWR chatmosphere is wide open at pwrshow.com. You can log on and talk along with us live here on the website, pwrshow.com. And let's not forget the PWR Forum, also available at pwrshow.com. Meathead, coming off the heels of your big engagement last week and the heels of a big college football game, let's talk some wrestling.
And you know,
tonight,
it's a great segue because, as you know, for Ohio State, probably a top 10 pick, the son of Road Warrior Animal,
John who?
Lauren Titus.
Oh, good, very good.
Thank you.
Your coaching earlier work.
Yeah, plays for Ohio State. Once again, he will be a top 10 pick probably in the NFL draft in April.
We're going to go in-depth tonight on the recently released specifics from the Congressional Steroid investigation. Big talking point there. We've got a full preview of TNA Genesis, our VI3, of course, your phone calls and live chat, and a preview of this week's PWR TV, along with all the latest news from WWE and TNA. But first, Meathead, let's talk about the big news story coming out of the week, which is that congressional report released this past week about steroids in professional wrestling. Here are the details. California Representative Henry Waxman released a report saying that the, and I quote, systematic deficiencies in the testing and policies and practices of pro wrestling need to be examined. This coming off the heels of a 12-month investigation that was specifically focused on professional wrestling, namely WWE and TNA. Representative Waxman goes on to say, since the investigation began, both WWE and TNA have made efforts to improve their steroid testing programs, but these efforts suffer from a lack of independence and transparency. Now, they spoke to both Stephanie McMahon and Dixie Carter, along with Vince McMahon of WWE and TNA, respectively. We're going to talk about some of those comments that Stephanie McMahon made. These interviews were interesting reads because they went much more in depth into the business of WWE and TNA, and not just talking about steroids. Obviously, the Chris Benoit tragedy came up, which was one of the things that sparked this investigation, but a very interesting statistic on the TNA side of things, where 43%, Meathead, 43% of their talent as of 1 year ago was taking advantage of some type of illegal drug. We've got more specifics on those numbers as we get further down the line. But, Meathead, your initial thoughts on the congressional involvement of professional wrestling. Obviously, as one of the hosts of Fantasy Sports Weekly right here on 540 ESPN Saturday mornings, you've talked a lot about the steroid scandal in Major League Baseball, which seems to come up every couple of years or so. Obviously, the National Football League and other sports entities have had to deal with similar type investigations. They have installed policies by which they punish their players if they violate them, as has WWE. But what are your thoughts on this big congressional report coming out just last week saying that wrestling needs to be further examined as it pertains to steroid use specifically.
Here's the problem, and not only the problem of you talking forever as I fell asleep there waiting for you to finish. Just kidding. The problem is that wrestling is not a sport. Wrestling is an entertainment show. Now, if the government's going to stick its nose into that business, that entertainment portion of our society, then they need to stick their business into figure skating,
which I think they already do.
Crackheads that do crack. Why don't they worry
they're already
more?
In that.
Well, listen. Why don't they worry more about the people that are sitting on the street doing crack and heroin and doing whatever to their body instead of worrying about? I mean, it's a hot button topic that somebody felt that they were going to use to catapult their career, so they're going to go ahead and do this independent report and blah blah blah. You know what? Steroids are a problem wherever they are, not just because they're in wrestling, not just because they're in sports in general. They're a problem, period. Drugs are a problem, period. And I hate to be on a soapbox right now, but the government should be spending a lot more time on trying to fix the economy than screwing around, wasting their time on two entertainment shows.
We got a man in place who's going to take care of this economy thing.
And I voted for him, by the way. I don't mean to go off on a rant here, but that man can't fix everything this week or when he's, put into office in the next couple weeks. What's the date?
January 20th.
January 20th, when he's finally sworn in as our president, the 44th, I believe?
44.
When he's sworn in as the president, it's not a magic cure. Okay? He's got a lot of work to do.
Took 8 years to break it. But let's talk about some of those comments specifically that Stephanie McMahon made. But before we do that, let's go to the phone lines. And remember, you can join us. The number 276-ESPN all over southeastern Wisconsin. Again, 276-ESPN. Or if you're listening nationally or internationally even, 1-800-990-ESPN on the toll-free line. That's 1-800-990-3776. Lots of spirited discussion, again, going on right now in the PWR chatmosphere at PWRshow.com, where you can also listen to the show live. It's a player right on the chat page. But let's go now to Ruben, coming to us from the Great White North of Ontario, Canada. Ruben, you are live on the Pro Wrestling Report on 540 ESPN.
Hi, yeah.
Ruben, what's going on?
I'm doing great. I just wanted to have some few comments on the steroid issue or the report.
Sure.
I feel as if that it's just another ploy to get away from the real problems in the government or our country today. To me, it's like, if you want to go after professional wrestling, then you go after Hollywood. You go after the NFL, and you go after the NBA. I mean, I can understand baseball because that is somewhat governed by the United States government, but for going after...
shouldn't be. Sorry about that, Ruben. Go right ahead. I'm sorry for interrupting you.
Yeah, no problem. But,
keep going.
For you to keep on flagging what is already considered by non-fans a low form of entertainment.
But it's athletic competition. These are athletes, and here
that's the key word, though. It is an entertainment show.
But one of the things that Representative Waxman said is, with the marketing that professional wrestling either does or naturally has towards children, and these being their role models, this is setting up a bad example. A bad example for the children of America. That is the angle he's taking with this. So with that in mind, that's how the investigation was able to move forward. Is it was looking into whether or not these were bad role models and if they needed to step in.
Is a bad example for children.
Now, keep in mind, wrestling is regulated in many states. Remember, in New Jersey, I think actually it was a tax situation, but in many states, they still have to get approval from the Athletic Commission before they come in and do a wrestling event. So whether or not it is a legitimate sport or whether or not it is subject to this type of scrutiny by the United States Congress is an argument that can be had on many different levels. But the angle that Waxman took with this was these were role models for America's children, and they, at least in TNA's situation, are on many different drugs, and most of them are potentially influencing those children in such a way that they would do the same thing.
Well, I personally think that, if it's such a big deal for the United States government to go after, I say don't go after steroids. Go after the harder drugs like HGH or even marijuana, which they were both on the report itself.
Ruben. You
make
make valid points there, Ruben, and I don't know how things would be up in Canada. Now, here's an interesting question. I was listening to a bit of comedy the other day. I forget who the artist was, but they were talking about how there was some Canadian versus United States argument going on, and they were talking about, I can't even name the Canadian president. It's a prime minister, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it's prime minister in Canada.
Who is it right now? Ruben?
What's the name of the prime minister of Canada, Ruben?
I actually don't know.
Oh, no.
You live there and you don't even know.
Oh, wow. Well, Ruben, enjoy your free health care. And
you don't even know the... Unbelievable. How's that Canadian education system?
We'll talk to you very soon again here on the Pro Wrestling Report at 540 ESPN.
Cool.
Remember, you can join us on the PWR phone lines. The number is 276-ESPN here in Milwaukee or all over southeastern Wisconsin if you're listening to us on the radio airwaves, or 1-800-990-ESPN. That's 800-990-3776 all over the world if you're listening live at pwrshow.com. We're going to take a timeout. When we come back, we've got some very interesting comments. 138 pages was this report from WWE's Stephanie Levesque's comments on this steroid situation. We've got the highlights of them that we're going to talk about in depth when we come back right here on the Pro Wrestling Report on 540 ESPN.
I got long sideburns and my hair slicked back coming to your town. In my pink Cadillac, I'm just a honky-tonk man.
He's a honky-tonk man.
I'm just a honky-tonk man.
He's a honky-tonk man.
I'm just a honky-tonk man. I'm cool, I'm cocky, I'm bad.
Actually, next week, Meathead, this is the Pro Wrestling Report on 540 ESPN. Thank you so much for joining us here live Monday night, January 5th, 2009. But coming up next week on PWR TV, it is the 10 best, we'll announce it here, the 10 best wrestling theme songs of all time as voted on by the viewers and the listeners out there at pwrshow.com. So make sure you tune into that show next week after an all-new edition of PWR TV this week. Meathead, just before we took that time out here live on 540 ESPN, we were talking about the steroid scandal in professional wrestling. A scandal called that because of this latest report by California Representative Henry Waxman, what his name is, I believe.
As he waxes poetically.
Henry Waxman, yes. And they had some pretty good cooperation from the WWE and TNA. And let's talk about some of those interesting comments that Stephanie McMahon had for the interview. Now, the WWE lawyers were there. Vince McMahon had some comments as well. And as I said earlier, they dug much further into the actual product than just steroid use. So some of the quotables from Stephanie were, specifically regarding MVP, WWE is hoping MVP will be a main eventer one day.
One day.
Wasn't he a main eventer at one point?
He was a top-level guy, but he was not a main eventer.
Reference the steroid situation, Stephanie does not agree that the WWE stars that we see today are more muscular in general terms than wrestlers during the 80s. Now, Meathead, let's talk to that point. You think back to the 80s. Everybody was so puffy. You know the telltale signs of steroids, back knee and puffy muscle. Hogan had it, the Warrior had it. Everybody who has admitted that they were on steroids have that defined look. Remember back on an episode of PWR TV, we got challenged by a viewer and we looked at Triple H of old and Triple H of today. A lean, trim, slim, and fit.
You can
Triple
actually
H
say the
compared
same thing about JBL. He's got a very thin face as well. Jericho looks a little small now, too. So
I can't think of one person. A lot of people say Batista, but Batista is too defined. Batista is too refined to either be abusing steroids now or have done it in recent history. But there are not many people in WWE, or even TNA for that matter. Well, let's back that up a little.
Holla!
In WWE for right now, that you can look at it and say, yep, he's popping the roids.
Holla!
In the 80s and early 90s, you could look at almost every talent and see that. So right now, it doesn't appear as if muscular definition is something that WWE is looking for. Look at Jeff Hardy. He's the current WWE champion. The man doesn't look like he's been to a gym in quite a while. I mean, he doesn't come off as good on
Either
TV
does
as it does when you're Edge, the skinniest fat guy, or the fattest skinny guy you know. That's what he says.
Yeah.
So what about that comment from Stephanie about the difference between wrestlers today and in the past?
I think it's true.
No.
I think a lot of their guys, aren't as puffy anymore. The last big puffy guy they had got suspended, came back, and was puffy again. I mean, think about the pictures that we saw in between his disappearance the masterpiece, Chris Masters. When he disappeared, he was that lean, slim-looking guy. When he came
Triple
back,
H made a comment about it. You left 6 months, and you came back half the man you were.
Yeah, he
in
came back,
the PWR chat atmosphere at PWRshow.com, user Flair Country says Rey Mysterio looks like he was on steroids. Now, remember when he returned? I believe it was at a SummerSlam, perhaps in 2007, maybe 2008. I don't think it was that recent, though. He came back, and he was just puffed.
Yep.
And he has lost a lot of that weight. Now, some would say, and I regarded it to the fact that he had been off for so long, obviously couldn't work out, had gained a little bit of weight. That happens. That's acceptable. But interesting comment from the Chatmosphere at PWRshow.com.
And, you know, another thing to look at, too, is baseball season, for example, or even a football season or a basketball season. Major League Baseball guys, you know, sometimes are a little bit bigger at the beginning of the year, and they, you know, through the season start to lose weight, too. So those guys might hit it hard during the off season, but, you know, they kind of cycle off, if you will.
Reference the Chris Benoit tragedy, Stephanie McMahon said the tragedy made the company look at how they could be treating their employees better. They asked them if they had any financial planning or health insurance, which a little over 60% of the wrestlers have. Now, that's an encouraging statistic. Remember, WWE does not provide a formal health insurance policy. They have been known to pick up the tab for injuries that occurred during the line of duty in WWE, but saying that a little over 60% of the wrestlers do have financial planning and or health insurance is encouraging. Remember, Jesse Ventura got in a lot of trouble. He tried to unionize professional wrestling. One of the key things was to get that health insurance, which has not happened, and many will say will never happen. But a lot of the talents at least taking advantage of that opportunity and getting themselves some type of health plan. They've also implemented seminars for the wrestlers, including quote-unquote exit strategies, such as life skills type seminars for when they are done in WWE. You look at one of our stories from last week about China and her unfortunate situation with a mixture of alcohol and prescription medication, and she's been on a roller coaster ride, as has her friend Sean Waltman, since they both left professional wrestling. You see and hear many times about the victimization of these former stars once they leave the business. Lots of money, lots of free time, and no responsibilities means a lot of problems at times for these athletes. Let's go to the PWR phone lines, and remember, you can join us at number 276-ESPN, 276-3776, locally here in southeastern Wisconsin, or 1-800-990-ESPN, 1-800-990-3776, all over the world. We are going to go to Terry in Waukesha. Terry, you're live on 540 ESPN.
Gentlemen, good evening. How are you doing this evening?
Excellent. All right, Terry.
Well, here it goes. I'm going to give you my 2 cents, and probably going to tick a lot of people off, but I'm going to.
You might get change back.
Yep, I might get change back. Telling you right now, folks, I'm glad that to see somebody's stepping up and saying professional steroids and professional wrestling is a problem. So I'll tell you right now, I've mourned way too many passing of way too many of my favorite wrestlers due to not just steroids, pain medication, anything else. I mean, you look at, I hate to say it, you look at what happened with Chris Benoit, you look at what happened to Eddie Guerrero, look at what happened with Brian Pillman, you look at what happened with many, many wrestlers who should still be having great careers today who are no longer with us. And as much as I heard Damian talk about what the WWE is doing, they need to do more. TNA needs to do more. People out there need to understand that these guys put themselves and their bodies through a lot more and don't get enough in compensation for it. I don't care if the WWE's got a health plan or not. If you look at all the wrestlers who have passed away in the last 5 years, where were most of them their last stop? Either TNA or WWE. And I don't care what anybody says. Vince McMahon I put a lot on his shoulders. Why? Because he's the guy who brought professional wrestling into the mainstream. He's the one that says, oh, we have this wellness program, so on and so forth. But I'll tell you right now, guys, he got investigated for it once. He should get investigated for it twice, and somebody needs to put out there that professional wrestling has a bigger steroid and drug abuse problem than basketball, baseball, and football combined. Because I'll tell you right now, if you look at all those guys who have passed away within the last 5 years, most of those guys should still be around today making a career for themselves.
An interesting point, but I will challenge that and say, how many of those were directly related to steroid use? Now, remember, what started this investigation was the Chris Benoit tragedy, which had nothing at all to do with steroids. The investigations show there was a brain condition. Could have been multiple concussions. We'll talk about Stephanie's comments on that a little bit later on. But a lot of these tragic deaths, specifically Eddie Guerrero, Chris Benoit, ultimately, yes, drugs were an issue at some point in their life. And we all know the long-term effects of steroids. Look at superstar Billy Graham, who had to have, I believe, 2 hip replacements as a result of his steroid use in the 70s. There are certainly abuses going on in the business, but I firmly disagree that it is more substantial than that in any other major league sport right now on a percentage basis.
But again, wrestling is not a sport. It is an entertainment show.
Right, but Damian, here's my point. My point is take a look at Chris Benoit, circa WCW, okay?
Uh-huh.
Look at Eddie Guerrero, circa WCW. Look at
Puffy.
No, you
were actually thinner in WCW.
No.
Yes, they were. You look at, because what is Vince McMahon's big thing? What is his big thing? Let's be truthfully honest here.
It has been rumored to be the larger the better.
That is correct.
But look at who's there now. Randy Orton's not huge. Jeff Hardy's not huge. Edge isn't huge. The Undertaker has slimmed down substantially. Granted, he's old.
All right, but who? Okay, 9 times out of 10, Jeff Hardy. Who does he get squashed by? He gets squashed by Vladimir Kozlov. Who did Bret Hart get squashed by when he was champion? Yokozuna. You look at all these guys who are like average size or 5'10" or whatever. They get squashed by bigger and larger guys. Vince McMahon, the bigger the better. They put the belt on the Great Khali, who is probably the worst wrestler in the entire world. The guy knows 5 moves altogether, and he couldn't perform them all in one night if he tried.
That's 2 fewer than Goldberg.
Yeah, let's be honest. Bill Goldberg is terrible. I'm not even going to stick up for that guy. I won't stick up for any. I mean, seriously, Jeff Hardy, look at Rey Mysterio. How many times did Mysterio get squashed? And he's 10 times the wrestler that any of those big muscle-bound geeks are.
But again, you know what? We got to remember, this is a show. It's not a legitimate sporting competition. Khali was made champion because they got him over in India. It helped sell merchandise and TV stuff over there. And Khali is a big guy. It was a believable thing that Khali, a big guy like that, could be a champion. It had nothing to do with wrestling ability.
But they are athletic. They are athletic entertainers. Correct.
Correct.
They are athletic entertainers. So here's the thing. I don't care if it's athletic entertainment or you call it a sport or whatever. Let's not call it a sport. It's athletic entertainment. But let's be seriously honest here. The bigger, the better. Hulk Hogan was champion for 7 years for a reason. He was 305 pounds, and all of a sudden he
he was 303. He was champion because he was charismatic.
Yeah.
Which Stephanie goes on to talk about. Terry, we've got to cut you short as we're running short on time here, but we've got more comments here from Stephanie McMahon, and that's an interesting discussion for future weeks, Meathead. Because we've had it many a times on the 10 years on the television program. Is pro wrestling a sport? I can get out the dictionary again.
It's not. The dictionary is incorrect.
The dictionary is incorrect. Yes, that just sounds so intelligent. The dictionary is incorrect.
Yeah, you heard it. Meathead said that. Meathead for president.
Stephanie McMahon says that only her and John Lauren Titus decide who gets called up to the main roster from developmental. Although, of course, Vince can decide to call someone up if he really wants to. Stephanie also noted that they have called up certain talents to add more ethnicity to the brands, to your Khali point earlier.
Well, Khali wasn't somebody that was in developmental. Khali was just an actor that was doing, different stuff on the side, and Khali was brought in to be an attraction, a special, what did Jim Ross call it in his Ross report a couple of years ago? Khali is
special attraction.
A special attraction, yeah.
They're in the midst of capitalizing on ECW's strong following. I'll repeat that, as Lewis Black would say. They are in the midst of capitalizing on ECW's strong following, but they want to change its image and clean it up. I think what the reference there is to ECW's past strong following.
Correct.
And changing its image.
They've crapped on that, the former ECW image a long time ago. That's not your daddy's ECW.
In reference to pay scale for the talent, main eventers can make between $150,000 and $200,000 per pay-per-view event. They can also make up to $1 million at a WrestleMania event. They also say that Stephanie, she wants everyone to be a main eventer because it means more money for everyone. 2 very interesting points about the financials and what WWE may be looking for in talent. And the final comment referenced what I referenced before, the concussion situation. Stephanie said they are looking to do proactive impact testing for concussions or for workers that may be prone to concussions. Remember Christopher Nowinski? He had a very short time.
An actual Harvard graduate.
Indeed, and that time was cut short due to multiple concussions. Chris Benoit's situation was said to be as a result of multiple concussions.
And you heard the story that followed afterwards because Nowinski was doing research on it, and he contacted the Benoit family.
Correct. He wanted the brain.
He needed an autopsy on the brain, and he's actually been doing some research. You know, kind of like I Am Legend. Maybe Chris Nowinski will be able to, do a little concussion study, and it might be able to pass it down to football or other contact sports like hockey.
Interesting comments from Stephanie McMahon, as we said, as well. Dixie Carter speaking to the Congressional Review Board about this situation, and TNA had a lot more to answer for than WWE. Lest we not forget, WWE instituted its wellness policy and made modifications to it. Lest we not forget, Jeff Hardy's a two-strike violator of the wellness policy. He's got one more strike and he's gone. TNA does not have a real formal policy in place. However, they did open the door for drug testing by this group. That was done in January of 2008. Meathead, those findings are very surprising. 60 talents were tested. 15 of those 60 tested positive for steroids 1 year ago this month.
Mm-hmm.
15 of those 60. 11 others tested positive for other drugs, 6 of which were marijuana, other drugs rounding out the other 5 there. Now, obviously, TNA with no policy, yet they opened the door to have this testing done. And these results, 43% of the roster. 43% of the roster found to be abusing illegal drugs.
But you know what? Maybe 43% of the country is abusing illegal drugs. Again, I'm not trying to be the one that defends professional wrestling. What I'm trying to say is the government needs to find something better to do. That's Obama's government now. That's Obama's government
listen,
right
I've
now.
made that point for years. But the situation at hand is they are investigating this. They have made these findings, and the discussion is, what does wrestling need to do in order to increase or improve its image? Because if this is the image that it's going to be given from Congress, basically, saying as far as TNA goes, half their roster is on drugs, they've got to do something about that. So TNA's policy compared to WWE
technically they don't, Damian, because they're independent contractors. They don't have to do a damn thing about it.
Yeah, they're independent contractors, but much like the Janet Jackson Super Bowl thing, there is a
liability.
Yeah, there is a liability. There is a responsibility for companies.
You can't use Janet Jackson because WWE shows nipples every hour.
Including
Mae
on
Young.
WWE.com.
Oh, Vicky, no. There's no nipples showing. It's all boxed up.
Excuse me, my boobies are showing.
TNA needs to institute a clearly defined wellness policy similar to that of WWE. WWE set the standard basically a couple of years ago when they instituted their policy. It helped them dramatically during the Chris Benoit situation because they were able to essentially just brush that situation off. Granted, it caused them no ill business effects as a result of that tragedy, but they have, does TNA, they've got to put a policy in place and make that policy public, even if it's a loose policy, something to simply say, now that we have found out 43% of their talents as of 1 year ago, that's an important point to make, as of 1 year ago, were found to be abusing illegal substances, they've got to have a firm policy, they've got to enforce that policy, even if it's, we'll test you every 6 months, and if those results come back showing that you're on an illegal substance, it's a fine, what have you. I am not specifically aware of the policies in the other professional sporting leagues, which the question is, why should the government even be investigating them? And remember the whole baseball saga. I think that was right around Katrina, wasn't it? And there was all these congressional hearings going on about steroids.
Conspiracy, Damian. They're trying to pull the old there's nothing going on over here. There's nothing going on over here. Look at this
Pay
hand.
no attention to the man behind
Look at this
the
hand.
curtain.
I know I'm doing visual things for Damian, but, there's nothing going on with my left hand. Watch my right hand.
In your opinion, what should TNA do to address this report?
Nothing. You want me to be honest? Nothing. Again, it's
so they should go around with the reputation that half their talent, they're a publicly visible company, half their talent are on drugs.
Let me rephrase. They should do what WWE does, come out with a public statement saying, we here at Total Nonstop Action Wrestling and what other companies they hold, strongly encourage our wrestlers to not use any performance-enhancing drugs, blah, 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 and just put on the show. Because, again, independent contractors.
That's the first step. They are, but ultimately, who's responsible for those independent contractors?
Themselves.
No. In the public eye.
In the public eye, it doesn't matter.
And it does matter. It matters substantially in the public eye.
I'm talking about legally speaking.
Yeah, no, I'm talking in the public eye. Who's responsible for those?
The company. The
company.
Sure.
Why did the WWE get such a negative amount of publicity from the Chris Benoit situation? Immediately, everyone assumed he was on steroids. It was roid rage. When that story was discovered not to be the case, how many people covered it?
Huh?
There wasn't a Larry King episode about that. There wasn't an Associated Press release about that.
There wasn't any retractions either.
Exactly. So that's why these companies, because these things, let's say TNA now discovered 43% of their talent's abusing illegal drugs. Let's say there's a similar or even more drastic situation involving a TNA talent. How do they protect themselves as a company? Because the family of that company, independent contractor or not, the family of that person or that situation could come in, sue the company. Company could be put out of business.
No, they can't.
Like that. Oh, they can.
Well, you can sue for anything here in this country, obviously, but if we're just going on generalizations, again, independent contractor puts whatever he wants into his own body. So, I don't know.
We're going to take a time out, ladies and gentlemen. When we come back, we're going to give you some TNA news, including information on buy rates from 2008 compared to 2007 and compared to WWE. We'll also have a preview of TNA's first pay-per-view of the year, Genesis, coming up this Sunday live on pay-per-view. And WWE News, our VI3, and a preview of this week's PWR TV. This is the Pro Wrestling Report on 540 ESPN.
This is the Pro Wrestling Report on 540 ESPN.
Where's Miss Jacqueline when you need her?
That was a great series.
We got to dig that out of the archives. There's so much in the archives we haven't released yet. Owen Hart, Al Snow, Disco Inferno, Buff Bagwell, Luna Vachon, Jim Cornette.
He's so cocky. He's so cool. He's just a disco dancing fool. And don't forget, Damien, as you're about to plug it, this could have been one of my honorable mentions.
Coming up next week on the Pro Wrestling Report television, Southeastern Wisconsin, that can be viewed on Time Warner Cable, Channel 14, Friday nights, right after WWE SmackDown, and on Wednesdays, all over the PWR website at pwrshow.com and several other web sources. This is the Pro Wrestling Report on 540 ESPN. You can join us here on the PWR phone lines by calling 276-ESPN. That's 276-3776, or all over the world at 1-800-990-ESPN, 1-800-990-3776. Meathead, let's get to some TNA news. Big news coming out of the big IWGP show in Japan.
I want to get banged.
Coming up from January 4th. Team 3D and the Motor City Machine Guns won Tag Team Gold, both of them winning Tag Team Championships at that show. Those matches are going to air on a future edition of Global Impact. Now, what's significant about Team 3D is they become now the only team to have won the IWGP, the Hustle, the WWE, WCW, and ECW Tag Team Championships in their long, storied tag team career. Now, I thought Brother Ray was injured.
That doesn't mean he didn't wrestle. It doesn't mean he wasn't in the match.
He was certainly in the match. Playing kayfabe.
Oh, right.
Got some interesting information released recently about the TNA pay-per-view business, and it shows that it's essentially flat over 2007, meaning no increase. Now, here's the interesting numbers. On average, they did about 25 or 30,000 buys per event. On average, WWE does about 450,000 buys when you include WrestleMania, which does about 1 million in and of itself. So over the course of the year, all of TNA's pay-per-views don't even add up to one WWE pay-per-view, including, well, no, they did beat December to December.
Oh, boy.
But the big shows in 2007 were Final Resolution, Destination X, Lockdown, and Bound for Glory, all with just around 35,000 buys. Obviously, Bound for Glory, the big show. The lowest purchased show with 17,000 buys was No Surrender. Main event on that was Kurt Angle versus Abyss. For 2008, they drew an average of about 29,000 buys per event, with Lockdown being the firm standout leader. Remember, Lockdown was from just outside Boston. 55,000 buys for that event, which featured Samoa Joe versus Kurt Angle. That was also when Samoa Joe became the TNA heavyweight champion for the first time. There was a lot of build going into that match, a lot of hype going into that pay-per-view because people knew this was Joe's moment, and it seemingly equaled buys. However, the next month they did less than half for TNA Sacrifice with only 25,000 buys. It gets worse from there, 20,000 buys for Slammiversary, the King of the Mountain match. The other strong events for 2008 for TNA, Bound for Glory doing 35,000 buys. So Bound for Glory not firmly established yet as the standout pay-per-view of the year. However, with so much hype behind it, Meathead, being on the road in Chicago, the weekend of activities, all of the promotion they did for it, you would think it would have equaled more buys. However, it was a 15,000 buy increase over the prior month's event, which was No Surrender, that featured Samoa Joe versus Kurt Angle versus Christian Cage. So the point of discussion, because these numbers are not horrible, by the way, this is still $10 million in revenue. $10 million in revenue. Let me say that again. So these numbers are not horrible, but they are substantially far away from WWE's numbers. Meathead, what, if anything, can TNA do?
You can't compare those two together. You really can't compare. You're talking about a company that basically, along with UFC and boxing, rules the pay-per-view world. I mean, this is something that's been their business for, since WrestleMania 1. This has been their business. It's over 25 years. 25 years of WWE doing pay-per-view the right way. Promotional. They're on everywhere. They used to do closed circuit, TV. They used to do head on down to the arena and watch it there, then put it up on the Jumbotron. You can't compare TNA's buys to WWE's buys. TNA is not even available everywhere.
It is. It's available on all pay-per-view outlets.
I'm talking about across the world.
That's true.
Because
WWE does do a lot of their business. That's a good point. Internationally on pay-per-view. And TNA, I would imagine, we have to get some details on that, but I would imagine, if available, most of them are available free of charge, which is where WWE was and still is in some parts of the world as far as their pay-per-view product goes. One question in the PWR Chatmosphere at PWRshow.com came from, as I try to find that thread here, but the question was, what are the ROH, Ring of Honor pay-per-view buy rates? We don't have that information. I was from Farley. How did Ring of Honor pay-per-view buys do? We don't have that information. But again, they're making money on these gigs, especially the ones from Orlando where their overhead costs are not substantially higher than anything else. Now, keep in mind, this revenue is split with the cable companies and
or the providers.
Still to draw $10 million in a year on pay-per-view, they're not losing money on it, but they can certainly increase the business. The challenges I see for TNA in these numbers are Bound for Glory, Slammiversary. A lot of the events they portray as big, huge events are not drawing more substantial numbers than other events. To have Lockdown go with 55,000 buys and be the most bought TNA pay-per-view in the last 2 years, maybe in the history of the company, is a bit unusual. There's no real pattern either. 2007, Final Resolution, 34,000 buys. 2008, 20,000 buys. There's no pattern there. And WWE, their numbers fluctuate wildly as well, but the numbers are so much higher that on a percentage-wise, it's about the same type of ebb and flow, I guess, from event to event. But in WWE, SummerSlam always delivers, Royal Rumble always delivers. Each of those accounts for at least 500,000 buys.
Well, the Royal Rumble always delivers because it's without WrestleMania, it's the number one pay-per-view of the year. But as far as the SummerSlam, it's the one that they hype the most. It is, again, we're talking, 20 years versus 5 years. We're talking this huge difference. I mean, the wrestling boom has gone up, down since WWE's been doing pay-per-views. So, I mean, again, you're talking about an adult compared to a kid, honestly.
Let's go to the PWR phone lines. We've got Sam from all the way across the pond in Ireland. Sam, you are live on the Pro Wrestling Report on 540 ESPN.
Hey, guys. How you doing? Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year. How did you celebrate the New Year? In a bar, of course.
Oh, yeah, all night long.
Yeah, and once again, remind everybody that how old is it you have to be to drink over by you?
To be 18.
Okay. Well, not so bad.
I'm moving across the pond. I got to do it.
So, Sam, what do you got?
Just on this whole TNA pay-per-view buy thing, I see it like this. I mean, when you watch TNA, you're going to know about WWE because they mention it a lot on their show. When you watch WWE, you're not going to know about TNA. TNA is not an established company. It's not as well known as WWE is, and that's what that's why the pay-per-view buys are so low in my view. I hate to say this, but they should be disappointed with themselves. They should be disgusted with themselves with those kind of buys that they got this year. I mean, 35,000 buys for their biggest pay-per-view of the year, and most of the part of it is the attraction of it. I mean, the set, the arena it's in.
Mm-hmm.
That's the most part of why people watch it, because of the attraction of it, what they see. But
because
TNA,
it's a show. I mean,
yeah,
it's an entertainment show. And actually, you just brought up something I've been saying over the last handful of weeks that we've been talking about. WWE fans may not necessarily know about TNA and Ring of Honor. TNA fans know about WWE, and most know about Ring of Honor.
Well, it's like
Ring
Kevin
of Honor
Nash
fans
said on this
know
very
about
program.
the rest of them.
Kevin Nash said, you watch TNA programming, you see WWE ads. You watch WWE programming, you don't see anything about TNA.
Right.
And
TNA
obviously
has
it's the position that WWE is in. And Sam, correct me if I'm wrong, but you were at WrestleMania 24 last year, correct?
yeah.
And I think
yeah.
we bumped into you. Went to the Impact Zone. You went to WrestleMania. Obviously, there is no comparison between WWE and TNA as far as a huge, major spectacle of an event.
Yeah.
But there are some small things that TNA can certainly do to increase that those buy rates for those events. I mean, it was in this very studio, by the way, that Jeff Jarrett confirmed Steve Mongo McMichael for Bound for Glory. And I don't even think we told anybody that, but it was in this very studio where he confirmed it, and he came in and told us about it. It's like, oh, all right. I mean, that's not going to get you buys. WWE is smart. They can afford the Tysons. They can afford the Floyd Mayweathers. They can afford that kind of stuff. And quite frankly, their star power is going to get them more buys. But TNA, again, these numbers can't be looked at as a bad thing, but when you look at them specifically for events, I think you got some problems. You got Kurt Angle or Samoa Joe on top of almost every show in 2008. But no data to really support whether they helped or hurt it. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, as I've always said, you can compare WrestleMania to Bound for Glory, but at the same time you can't. You really can't compare it. But I do believe since TNA have gone HD, it could be something. It could improve buy rates. I think it will. I think it has improved buy rates to WWE when they did it at the beginning of last year. It could be something.
But also, Sam, here in the States, Spike TV, not available on every broadcast. Like Time Warner here in the Milwaukee area does not have Spike TV available in HD, whereas USA is available across the country in high definition.
But Sam, we talked about this many a time before as well. It's the small things. It's the baby steps. It's a game of inches. And TNA continues to move inch by inch. They're not moving backwards. They're not doing anything that's setting them backwards. They're continuing to move forward. On average, 2,000 more people per month bought the pay-per-view than they did in 2007. That's more money for TNA. And they can pour that money back into the company. On average, every month, that's another $60,000. It may not seem like much, but you look at some of these knockouts that have only a $30,000 annual contract. They're making money. They're being successful. And they're continuing to grow. They're doing everything in their power to get the word out about their programming and spending within their means. They can do a huge advertising blitz on WWE programming for several weeks. It's going to cost them a fortune. However, maybe that's what they need. Maybe they need that's what they should have done with the Mick Foley arrival. Mick Foley had recently been on SmackDown, recently been known to have been in WWE. He didn't have the no-compete clause. He came over. They could have done some huge promotional spots on WWE television. However, don't forget the news bit we gave you last week, which is that Vince McMahon has veto power, at least with my network TV,
Correct.
on other wrestling company promotions.
No, on anything that airs during his program.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the same with the USA via NBC Universal deal,
right.
but certainly with the My Network TV deal. Sam, it's an expensive phone call. Do you have any other points for us?
Just one more. I just want to say I did know that Vince and Linda, were saying a few months ago, they said at this point they don't think TNA is any competition for them. That will change. No doubt about it. TNA haven't been around as long as WWE. Their company will change. It will get bigger. It will grow, get more established. They will get bigger buy rates, and they will be a competition for WWE, in my view, sometime in the future.
They also said that about WCW around 95, 96, when it was first coming up before it started beating them. Actually, from the time it started on TV, it beat them in the ratings. Thank you so much for that call, Sam, from all the way over in Ireland, calling into the Pro Wrestling Report here on 540 ESPN. Let's continue along the track of phone calls and go to Boston, Massachusetts. We've got Bowman here on the Pro Wrestling Report on 540 ESPN.
Happy New Year, guys.
Thanks so much.
How's it going?
It's
Excellent.
going great. What's up?
To kind of continue on the pay-per-view buy rates kind of question that popped up about TNA and kind of where they stand and how buy rates go. I mean, you like me had said, you just can't compare the two. You're talking about WWE where, at my age, where I'm at, like when I grew up, the only things I know about pay-per-view or that come on pay-per-view to buy are WWE or a boxing match.
Right. And then there was a good stretch at WCW.
That's the three things I'm thinking.
Yeah, and then there was that good stretch of WCW pay-per-views as well.
But there was WCW pay-per-views?
No, I said WCW.
What is WCW again?
Stop.
Oh, yeah. WCW is a defunct wrestling company purchased by WWE in 2001.
Bowman, do you realize that I'm smart enough to know where you would go with that? Do you like the way I set you up?
Remember the last WCW pay-per-view you were at, Meathead? Was it Mayhem here in Milwaukee?
Yes.
Somebody went to a WCW pay-per-view?
We got in free. But I think it was fun to watch. I've never seen people so cooperative when they had to move the 2,000 people or so that were in the arena to the hard camera side to look like people were actually there. I ain't joking, folks. I ain't kidding you. They did it.
The biggest thing, I think, the problem with why neither WCW nor TNA can see the numbers that WWE can see on pay-per-views is the overall thing that WWE and Vince has always figured out.
But here's the thing, though, Bowman.
It's how to make that one larger-than-life superstar that everybody's buying to see.
But who was that in WCW? Because we know it can be done.
It was Goldberg
in 1995. No, I'm talking in 1995 when Nitro went on the air. It immediately beat WWE in the ratings and did so until 1998 for 3 years almost, 86 weeks.
No, I'm talking about a character that they created. It was Goldberg. That was the character that WCW
Yeah, but that didn't carry them from 95. They obviously had acquired Hulk Hogan and took that.
They did carry him for a good year during the streak.
So TNA can do it, by the way. It's been done before. WWE has been overtaken before, but they were caught with their guard down. Are they going to let that happen again?
Are we comparing ratings or pay-per-view buy rates?
Oh, just overall business.
I don't think it's still. But we're talking overall business. Yeah, WCW definitely did it. But I call that a big help from having the name Hulk Hogan.
Yeah.
That is synonymous with professional wrestling in WCW. That is a WWE-made person, not a WCW-made person. The only person WCW, the only two people I know really WCW ever really made famous. That was Goldberg and maybe Diamond Dallas Page, and that's about it.
Yeah.
And really, that's about it.
Well, even though DDP still had a name when he was in AWA, but I mean, WCW really put him over the top.
Yeah, they're definitely, and I think they put him off top a lot later than they should have.
Yeah, and you could say the same with Harlem Heat as well.
Yeah, definitely with Harlem Heat. But I think that's the problem with right now with the TNA is who is TNA's guy? You knew in the WWE, Bret Hart was the guy, Shawn Michaels was the guy, Stone Cold Steve Austin was the guy, The Rock was the guy, Undertaker's the guy. You know in WWE right now, John Cena is the guy. Who is the guy for TNA?
It ain't Rhino.
It was supposed to be Samoa Joe, but that just didn't work.
I've said this on this program before. Samoa Joe's character died the second that they let Kurt Angle walk in his first match and take away his undefeated streak, and it really said there on television, WWE guys are better than TNA guys.
Yep.
It said it right there, and I said, I'm done with Joe.
Bowman, we got to take a timeout. Thank you so much for calling with that insightful conversation. Before we go to break in the PWR Chatmosphere, user Vash3001 said, TNA is like a really, really bad episode of Thunder. I referenced that because back in the day, I used to say WCW was like watching Thunder in Paradise. This is the Pro Wrestling Report on 540 ESPN. We'll be back in just a moment to wrap up the show.
Get in the ring Monday nights after Raw. It's the Pro Wrestling Report on 540 ESPN.
Is this DJ Gabriel's theme?
I don't know, but you know what? I'm thinking about watching some Max Sports.
Celebrating 10 years on the air. This is the Pro Wrestling Report on 540 ESPN. We're in the home stretch, and coming up this Sunday night, live on pay-per-view, TNA presents Genesis. Genesis coming to us from North Kakalaki,
North Carolina, to those that live out there. Hey, speaking
you
of
call it Milwaukee, and you live here.
Yeah, but so did Alice Cooper. You know, I was watching the Genesis preview on demand on my Time Warner Cable, as we're in the Time Warner Cable studios. And, you know, they showed the main event from Genesis last year, and this bald-headed black guy was at ringside destroying my entertainment value, trying to watch the match, and Damian Nelson ringside the whole time. How annoying.
I was at TNA Genesis last year. That was my first TNA pay-per-view where Booker T debuted in the Impact Zone down in Orlando, Florida. But let's talk about this year's Genesis. Moved around a couple of months. We've got a big series of matchups. 5 of them have been announced. Obviously, one of the big ones is Kurt Angle versus Jeff Jarrett in a grudge match. This one, lots of solid build, lots of heat leading into it. They haven't touched each other really since October. Meathead, what do you expect to see in this matchup?
A lot of good in-ring heat. I mean, as far as, you know, again, the build-up is there. You know, bound for glory, and they kind of stayed away from each other for a little bit, you know, kind of quiet. But, you know, it's been brewing underneath.
The Knockouts Championship will be on the line in a Lumberjills match, as Awesome Kong will go up against Christy Hemme.
I think Christy Hemme's got a chance.
She absolutely does. Remember, she came close. She's actually got a couple pinfall victories over Awesome Kong in some tag team matchups. That one should be fun to watch. Awesome Kong versus Christy Hemme. For the TNA Championship, Sting will defend against Rhino, Meathead.
Yeah, I know.
You know, I don't know what it is. I just can't.
I don't buy it.
I can't get behind Rhino.
It's
I can't care about Rhino.
It's not that I can't get behind Rhino. It's just that, you know that Rhino's not going to win this match against Sting. What's the point of Rhino being the champion over Sting?
Well, we can bring it to the front line.
Yeah, but he's not even technically the leader of Frontline, is he?
The X Division Championship Finals, a match that I cannot wait to see. Alex Shelley versus Chris Sabin. It's a little bit of a spoiler there, folks, but anyways, Alex Shelley.
Wait. We talked about this. No more spoilers on the show. A lot of people are getting upset.
No more?
Please,
we give a warning. We give an alarm and everything.
You didn't give me a chance to get the alarm. You said, oh, wait, bit of a spoiler here.
We had already given that spoiler a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Along with the new tag team champions
to
be crowned on a certain wrestling program this week.
Stop that.
It could be SmackDown. It could be ECW. Could be Impact.
Spoiler alert.
Whoop, 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 whoop. Alex Shelley, Chris Sabin, the Motor City Machine Guns. It's almost as big as when the Mega Powers exploded right here in Milwaukee during the main event on NBC, where Elizabeth was the catalyst of that. But, Meathead, this match, I can't wait to see it. It's going to be a great professional wrestling contest between two great professional wrestlers. Mick Foley returns to the ring as he teams up with AJ Styles, the Phenomenal One, and Brother Devon to take on Booker T, Kevin Nash, and Scott Steiner. Mick Foley returning to the ring at Genesis.
It's going to be wasted because, you know what? What's the team again? Mick Foley, AJ Styles, and Brother Ray?
Brother Devon.
Brother Devon.
Ray's hurt, remember?
But what is the point of those three?
Well, the point is you can still get great seats for this event in North Carolina. Many tickets are available, and the TNA is offering many ticket deals in the local North Carolina market. So check it out. And if you attend Genesis, we'd love to hear from you next Monday night when we are with you again live, Frank and Meathead.
Exactly 10 o'clock.
At 10 o'clock p.m. I'll be in San Diego, California, trying to call into the show, 10 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time. That's the Pro Wrestling Report next Monday night on 540 ESPN. Coming up this Wednesday at PWRshow.com, we're going to have Frank elaborate on his discussion about why he thinks ECW ruined wrestling, and then some more in-depth discussion on some of the other wrestling programs that are out there. We thank you so much for your patience in our late arrival tonight on air. We also thank you for sticking with us until the end. We will see you next week right here on the Pro Wrestling Report on 540 ESPN.
WAUK Jackson. Catch Tuesdays with Tauscher with Packer Tackle Mark Tauscher every Tuesday with Homer at 4:15 on 540 ESPN. WAUK Radio Sports Center.
For pulling off a 24-21 victory. OSU